Accessing peace. Existing without violence, with the ability to calmly resolve conflict. Downloading love. An overwhelming, deep, positive affection towards others. Activating liberty. Living your life as you see fit without infringing on the lives of others.
Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. I am your host, Darryl W. Perry, the Liberty Penguin, the Wombat, the uncut cocaine of libertarianism. And I'm here to answer your questions because, you know, that's the thing that I do on Fridays, and today just happens to be a Friday. Yeah, I'm not going to sing the horrible, horrible Rebecca Black song that's absolutely horrible that nobody should ever sing, ever. And I don't even know why it's actually a thing. And, you know, the first time that I heard the song, I thought that it was a parody of something. And then I found out, yeah, no, this thing is not intended to be a parody. This is supposed to actually be a thing. Yeah. Yeah, it's bad. Really, really bad. So, answering your questions, not rambling about what day it is, the question before me is thus. Darryl, is there any validity to this? Which was posted as a comment on a post that says employers in the United States are legally allowed to pay people with disabilities less money. Yes, you read that right. And then it's a post with a video that is kind of long, and I didn't actually watch the entire thing. I started watching it, and then there was just, wow. That's really all I can say. So the person that was arguing against having what is referred to as sub-minimum wage, and I'll get into, you know, exactly what sub-minimum wage is. And yes, I know it's self-explanatory. It's a wage that is below minimum wage, but there are very strict criteria here. But the woman that was arguing against this thing being in place, and it's specifically Section 14C of the Fair Labor Standards Act, she was saying that by paying somebody less than minimum wage, you're saying they're not a full person. No. That is not what is being said at all. What is being said is that this person, and again, there are very strict criteria here. What you're saying is this person is not able to do the job that they were hired to do, so we're going to pay them accordingly. So let me just go ahead and jump into the criteria here, and this from the Department of Labor. On their website, sub-minimum wage, and yes, I will post the link, they say the Fair Labor Standards Act provides for the employment of certain individuals at wage rates below the minimum wage. These individuals include student learners who are vocational ed students, as well as full-time students employed by retail or service establishments, agriculture, or institutions of higher learning. Also included are individuals whose earning or production capacity is impaired by a physical or mental disability, including those related to age or injury for the work to be performed. Employment at less than the minimum wage is designed to prevent the loss of employment opportunities for these individuals. Pause here. So, the real question is it better to employ someone who can do the job at 40% and pay them 40% of what you pay your other employees, or to have that person not be employed at all and earn $0? That is really the question. And when you think about it from a compassionate standpoint, yes, it is better that the person do something and earn some money than for them to not be able to earn anything and then rely solely on welfare. Continuing on, certificates issued by the Department of Labor, Wage and Hour Division are required for this type of employment. So anybody being paid sub-minimum wage, the employer is required by law to wind up getting certain certificates to be allowed to do that. Now, there's two more sentences here on the Department of Labor website on this particular page before I jump over to their fact sheet that has even more detailed information. They say the youth minimum wage is authorized by the Fair Labor Standards Act, which allows employers to pay employees under the age of 20 a lower wage for 90 calendar days after they are first employed. Any wage rate above $4.25 per hour may be paid to eligible workers during this 90-day period. Pause here. This is something that I was not aware of. I was not aware that teenagers were legally allowed to be paid a different minimum wage. Now, again, this is under federal law. There might be state laws that supersede this. So, it's one of those things of your mileage may vary. And the video in question, and yes, I will post the link in the show notes, the woman that was arguing against the sub-minimum wage was talking about a law in Vermont that requires employers to pay all employees the prevailing minimum wage, regardless of whether the person is actually able to do the job that they are hired to do at the production level that is expected of them. So let's say, for instance, you're hired to put widgets in boxes, and you're expected to be able to put 100 widgets in boxes in an hour. Due to various circumstances, let's say you're only able to put 40 widgets in boxes in an hour. Should you be paid the same rate as someone who is putting 100 widgets in a box per hour? Should you be paid the same as somebody that's putting 150 widgets in boxes per hour? That's really the question here. And no, it's not saying that the person who can't do 100 widgets per hour is less of a person. It's saying that their production level is lower. Stay tuned. There's more. In 1999, Darryl W. Perry began a search for traditional values, which led him down a path to the ideas of liberty. He tells the story in A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty. Of the book, Dr. Brian Sovereign says, sometimes it's funny, and sometimes I think it's crazy, but it's always authentic. Find A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty by Darryl W. Perry on Facebook, read reviews on Amazon, ask for A Rebel's Journey wherever books are sold, or visit arebelsjourney.com.
It is the year 91,001 BCE. Witness humanity's origins in Hyperchronius, a classic role-playing game for Windows PCs, with a story like no other game before. A liberty-oriented experience that is not to be missed. Go to ZOG.Ninja to get your copy of Hyperchronius today. Use the code FPP to get $1 off. Hyperchronius, ZOG.Ninja, code FPP.
Hey, this is Scott from the ANCAP Barbershop, and you're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. I'm answering your questions because that's what I do on Fridays. But before I get back to answering those questions, I want to make sure that I tell you about a wonderful sponsor, and that would be Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. Since 1977, Roberts & Roberts Brokerage has been a trusted source for buying and selling precious metals like gold and silver. They also deal in platinum and palladium. And they're a Bitcoin preferred business, meaning that they would rather have your Bitcoins than, say, get a check or a money order from you. And to show that they are Bitcoin preferred, they have permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. So pick up a phone and call Roberts & Roberts Brokerage today for knowledgeable advice on buying and selling precious metals and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 800-874-9760 or visit online at rrbi.co. That's rrbi.co. And on the website, you can actually look at all of the pretty shiny pieces of metal that they have. Again, gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. Continuing on answering the question about, is it actually legal in the U.S. to pay people with disabilities lower than the minimum wage? And the answer is yes, but again, there are very strict criteria. Jumping over to the Department of Labor fact sheet that goes into some of the criteria here. Fact sheet number 39, to be exact. And again, the link will be in the show notes. They say Section 14C of the Fair Labor Standards Act authorizes employers, after receiving a certificate from the Wage and Hour Division, to pay subminimum wages, less than the federal minimum wage, to workers who have disabilities for the work being performed. The certificate also allows the payment of wages that are less than the prevailing minimum wage to workers who have disabilities for the work being performed on contracts subject to the McNamara-O'Hara Service Contract Act and the Walsh-Healy Public Contracts Act. A worker who has disabilities for the job being performed is one whose earnings or productive capacity is impaired by physical or mental disability, including those related to age or injury. So again, going back to the example, and yes, I know that widgets, it's that, sort of catch-all term that is used when you don't want to name specific items. So you're hired, or someone else is hired, to put widgets in boxes at some kind of packing facility. And the company says we need 100 widgets placed in boxes every hour from every employee. If you're not able to do that due to, disability, age, or injury impairments, then we will pay you accordingly. But first, in order to do that, we actually have to go to the federal government and petition for a certificate to be allowed to do that. So if your production capacity is 40 widgets per hour, you would be paid basically 40% of the minimum wage, asterisk, assuming that we get federal approval. The fact sheet here from Department of Labor continues. Disabilities which may affect productive capacity include blindness, mental illness, developmental disabilities, cerebral palsy, alcoholism, and drug addiction. The following taken by themselves are not considered to be disabilities for purposes of paying subminimum wage: educational disability, chronic unemployment, receipt of welfare benefits, non-attendance at school, juvenile delinquency, and correctional parole or probation. So again, very limited set of who is allowed to even be included in the petition to get the certificate. Continuing on, it says Section 14C does not apply unless the disability actually impairs the worker's earnings or productive capacity for the work being performed. The fact that a worker has or may have a disability is not in and of itself sufficient to warrant the payment of a sub-minimum wage. So it's not just, oh, you have a disability, we're paying you less. It's you have a disability and you are not able to have the same productive capacity as other employees. And again, this is not saying that the person with a disability is a lesser person. It's not saying that they're only 40% of a person. It is saying that their earning capacity or their productive capacity is less than someone else. And then this really comes down to a much broader question. And I've heard people actually say that, well, someone flipping burgers isn't less of a person than a doctor, but they make a lot less money. Yeah, that's because there's a lot more skill required in brain surgery than flipping hamburgers. And if you want to tie a human's value as a human being to what amount of money they make, then, as they say on South Park, you're going to have a really bad time. Because that's not really what is being argued. What is being argued is the productive capacity. So if, again, you have an employee that can only do 40% of the work of someone else, that's going to limit the amount or the effectiveness of you delivering product to your customers. It's going to limit the amount of product that you wind up getting out on the shelves, which in turn, that's right, it lowers the amount of profit that you make. But you have some people that say, well, nope, everybody should wind up making, and what is it now? The fight for 15? Everybody should make $15 per hour? Well, you know how much paramedics wind up making right now, currently? Yeah, paramedics in some cases don't even make $15 per hour, but the person flipping hamburgers at McDonald's, the person taking my order at Wendy's, they want $15 per hour, even though someone doing much more intensive work, paramedics, they're not even making $15 per hour. Again, the question is, should people be allowed to make something or nothing? You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and numerous supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $1 per month through Patreon and get perks like ad-free versions of FPP Radio News and Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. That's fans.fppradio.com.
Cell 411 is a free app for Android and iOS that replaces government-controlled 911. Cell 411 allows you to preset a group of friends or private organizations to show up in any emergency. Cell 411 is a nightmare for the state because it proves their so-called services aren't needed. Cell 411 has had thousands of installs, and of course it's covered by the BIPCOT no government license. Cell 411 because your friends won't shoot you when you're in trouble. Without the government, who would build the emergency services? You and Cell 411. Get it today at getcell411.com. That's getcell411.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
Hey, welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. I am your host, Darryl W. Perry, the Liberty Penguin, the Wombat, the uncut cocaine of libertarianism, answering your questions. And I'll get back into the question and the answer here in just a moment. But first, I want to make sure that I tell you about Zencash. Zencash is an end-to-end encrypted system with zero-knowledge technology over which communications, data, or value can be securely transmitted and stored. With over 7,500 secure nodes, Zencash has one of the most distributed node systems of any cryptocurrency. Zencash is a platform for cryptocurrency and communications built by voluntarists for voluntarists, with the ideas of voluntary interaction being written into the white paper no less than half a dozen times. And the Zencash wallet is available for Linux, Mac, Windows, and Android devices. Learn more at zencash.com. That's zencash.com. So, answering a question about whether or not it is actually legal in the United States for employers to pay people with disabilities below the prevailing minimum wage. And again, the answer is yes. But, as I've stated, there are very specific requirements, and it requires a certificate from the federal government for the employer to be allowed to do that. So it's not just a thing to where the employer says, oh, yeah, you're disabled, so I'm paying you less money. Again, the specific requirements. And it says which, actually, the Department of Labor says which may affect the disabilities which may affect productive capacity, thus allowing an employer to wind up getting one of these certificates. May. Not there's a guarantee, but it may. Blindness, mental illness, developmental disabilities, cerebral palsy, alcoholism, drug addiction. And again, it says the presence of a disability in and of itself is not necessarily qualification, unless the disability actually impairs the worker's earning or productive capacity. Under coverage, any person who works on or otherwise handles goods that are moving in interstate commerce is individually subject to the minimum wage and overtime requirements of the Fair Labor Standards Act. In addition, employees of enterprises operated for a business purpose that have an annual dollar value of sell or business done at least $500,000 are also subject to Fair Labor Standards requirements. Furthermore, employees of public agencies, hospitals, institutions primarily engaged in, and the Act's own words, quote, in the care of the sick, the aged, or the mentally ill or defective who reside on the premises, schools for children who have disabilities, or preschools, elementary or secondary schools, or institutions of higher learning are covered on an enterprise basis regardless of the annual dollar value of the employer. And now under certification. Employers must obtain an authorized certificate from the Wage and Hour Division prior to paying a subminimum wage to employees who have a disability for the work being done. Employers shall submit a properly completed application, and then they go over the application names and the required supporting documentation to the Department of Labor, and then they give the address and a telephone number. Certificates covering employees of work centers and patient workers normally remain in effect for 2 years. So it's not just, oh, you hired somebody, you got a certificate, and now you can pay them subminimum forever. No, you have to renew the certificate every 2 years. Under commensurate wage rates, subminimum wage must be commensurate wage rates based on the worker's individual productivity, no matter how limited, in proportion to the wage and productivity of experienced workers who do not have disabilities performing essentially the same type, quality, and quantity of work in the geographic area for which the labor force of the community is drawn. And then they go into how that is determined, and then there is worker notification. Each worker with a disability, and where appropriate, the parent or guardian of the worker, shall be informed orally and in writing by the employer of the terms of the certificate under which such worker is employed. In addition, employers must display the Wage and Hour Division poster notice to workers with disability paid at special minimum wages, and then they give the number, the publication number for that. Now, I was hoping to be able to go into a little bit of the history of minimum wage laws, and I might be able to get into this a little bit, but not sure exactly how deep we'll dig into this. This from UC Davis. What is the history of the minimum wage? Again, minimum wage is the lowest wage that employers may legally pay workers, and the first minimum wage law ever in the history of the world was in New Zealand in 1894. With the passage of the Fair Labor Standards Act in the United States in 1938, the minimum wage was initially set to 25 cents per hour, asterisk, for covered workers. Since then, the minimum wage has been raised 22 separate times, most recently in July 2009. The Fair Labor Standards Act provided a number of federal protections for the first time, including payment of minimum wage, overtime pay for work over a set number of hours in a week, restriction on child labor, and record-keeping requirements. Link will be in the show notes. Stay tuned. There's more here on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Why do they hate us? Is libertarianism compatible with Islam? Davi Barker answers these questions and more in Voluntary Islam and Other Essays. He advances the voluntarist cause with analysis of the confluence of values between Islam and libertarianism, as well as contemporary movements from the Tea Party to the Arab Spring. Voluntary Islam by Davi Barker is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates, like Namecheap, Spendabit, and Amazon at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. Or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. That's shop.fppradio.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry. Online at fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. I am your host, Darryl W. Perry, the Liberty Penguin, the Wombat, the uncut cocaine of libertarianism. And I'm answering your questions, specifically the question about whether or not employers in the United States are legally allowed to pay people with disabilities what is referred to as subminimum wage. And yes, they can in very strict criteria. Again, I've gone over that. The link will be in the show notes. And you know, one thing that's interesting, the original minimum wage law that was passed in 1923 that applied to women and children in the District of Columbia was ruled to be unconstitutional. But yet 15 years later, the Fair Labor Standards Act wound up passing through Congress, and that has never been deemed to be unconstitutional. So what happened in those 15 years? Well, people learned to love socialism, I guess, because depression. And yeah, I know some people might take issue with me calling a minimum wage law socialism, but really, it's very close to where it is a government telling employers what they are and are not allowed to pay their employees. Again, the question isn't whether or not someone making $4 an hour is only a percentage of a person compared to somebody making $8 per hour. The question really is, should you restrict someone from making money, or should you force them by law to make $0? That is really the question. Again, going over the history of the minimum wage, and yes, the link will be in the show notes. In 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act applied to industries whose combined employment represented about 20% of the labor force. Coverage has been expanded over time, and the wage now covers approximately 130 million workers, or 84% of the labor force. There are 5 states with no state minimum wage laws, meaning that the prevailing federal minimum wage applies. There are 2 other states where that is lower, but again, the prevailing federal wage applies. Don't forget, every Friday, I answer your questions. Send those over, ama.fppradio.com.
The podcasts of FPP Radio are licensed under Copy Heart. We believe that copying is a form of flattery and do not abide by the copyright laws. Those laws serve to restrict the flow of ideas which no one can really own. Copying is an act of love. Love is not subject to law. If you enjoy the show, consider joining the Fans program and get perks like ad-free versions of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio and FPP Radio News, and also get a copy of the monthly newspaper FPP News. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com.